Top of the morning, Dan, and in for Amy this morning, Jeannie Ives, former state legislator and gubernatorial candidate, now principal, breakthrough-ideas.com, and host of The Real Story with Jeannie Ives, Sundays on these airwaves. The P. Diddy trial has begun in earnest, the criminal trial. Of course, the civil suits continue to roll in. He is facing the loss of his freedom, the loss of his money, and the loss of his personal status in new and exciting ways. A new civil suit. A woman identified only as Jane Doe claims that Combs took her into his bedroom, locked the door, pinned her down by her neck, telling her, quote, "I'm going to suck the life out of you," unquote. This according to court documents obtained by TMZ. And there's more humiliating detail in these allegations. The woman alleges she cleaned herself off after she was attacked by P. Diddy while he laid naked on the bed, rushing to the door where she was directed out of the apartment by a bodyguard. Now, some additional context. This incident allegedly happened more than 20 years ago. After the attack, she says Combs contacted her several times, inviting her to his white party, but she didn't return any of his calls. And then there's this. Court documents show that the woman felt, quote, relieved, unquote, after seeing Combs's, P. Diddy's, erect penis, which she compared to a large Tootsie Roll, because she wouldn't feel any pain because of Combs' small phallus that lacked, quote, length and girth. She referred to his Tootsie Roll as the itty bitty ditty.
The butterfly, that's old. Let me see the Tootsie Roll. Yeah, 1994.
Combs, I mean, I hate to make light of this, but I mean, in addition to that, this is getting interesting. Newsmax reported that Hakeem Jeffries, he's the minority leader in the House, the Democrat Socialist Party leader. According to testimony, Jeffries was a recurring guest of honor at covert, quote, Communist Party freak-offs, themed around exaggerated communist nostalgia. Sources familiar with the investigation say the parties began with theatrical and controversial acts, including staged flag-burning performances meant to lampoon Cold War hysteria. Diddy claimed Jeffries often insisted on the presence of young Hispanic male performers costumed as flamboyant versions of Fidel Castro, complete with glitter-covered fatigues and choreographed cigar routines.
Didn't know he was so politically aware.
Yes, a flair for the theatrical. Mm-hmm. And remember, I mean, these freak-offs are all, basically orgies.
Yeah,
That's
sex parties. Mm-hmm.
Those are the allegations. Now, Cassie Ventura, his longtime paramour, testified in the criminal trial. And that cross-examination was quite interesting, too. And frankly, it went to form. It went to the form that our next guest suggested it would. Todd Spodek is a criminal defense attorney who represented Anna Sorkin, the phony heiress from several years ago. I'm sure we'll get some color from him on that case, because perhaps he argues it informs some of the defense you're going to see from Diddy, which you did in part in the cross-examination of Cassie Ventura. This is getting wild. I mean, it's serious because of the seriousness of the criminal charges against him, but it's also just so over the top. One wonders if P. Diddy's legal defense team will be able to separate in the jury's mind the salaciousness of this all from the standards required to convict him on criminal charges. For more on this, let's be joined by Todd Spodek. Todd, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So, as I said, from reading your piece in The Spectator, it seems like you were right on the mark with what the criminal defense attorney, what Diddy's defense attorneys attempted to do, which is to basically say, look, this may be something you wouldn't want to participate in, Mr. and Mrs. jury member, but it was consensual. It was people that wanted to be around P. Diddy star power. And just because it's not your cup of tea doesn't mean he did anything illegal. Is that a fair representation of what they attempted to insinuate?
I think that's spot on, and you may have a place on the defense team if they need someone else. Because what's happening here is there's no question as to like the underlying facts. Puffy and his entourage had these wild sex parties with both civilians and celebrities and all types of people, and that's going to be, uncontroverted throughout the trial, and they have to own that up front. And they have to try and frame it in a way that says this, these experiences were unorthodox, and certainly they may not be for everyone, but this is the lifestyle they chose to partake in, and that's fair and legal. And I think, the cross-examination yesterday of the star witness, Cassie Ventura, shows that there are text messages that support that, she wanted to partake in them, or at a minimum felt obligated to let Puffy believe that she wanted to partake in them. And the entire trial has to connect that these were consensual, dark, potentially violent sexual experiences, but these were adults consenting to them.
But the problem, it seems to me, that he has is there are a bunch of accusers that have come forward. I mean, just search the sheer volume of them and the volume of witnesses the state will put on against him. They're not all going to have text messages because they had this long-standing romantic relationship, and they're not all going to, so the evidence, it seems to me, just from what's in the public domain, will be clearer than the Cassie Ventura evidence in terms of saying, well, this was sort of an unwanted advance, or this was something that this person didn't want to participate in and didn't appreciate what he or she was getting into before he or she showed up to the party.
Yeah, I think that's accurate, and I think it's kind of like where there's smoke, there's fire. There is going to be a avalanche of testimony supporting the government's position that what he really was doing was coercing various people into this lifestyle. And so it's one thing to make that voluntary choice and choose to be part of it, and it's another thing to do it out of fear of violence, fear of retribution, fear of having your personal sexual life distributed online, as there's evidence to support he took videos of various people. And it's really, it's a really sad state when you hear this stuff. It's just horrible that, someone at the height of their power, who certainly had no shortage of men and women interested in being romantic with him, would choose to go down this path. So I think it is an uphill battle for the defense team. I think they're doing the best that they can, and certainly I respect, their position and what they're trying to do. But I do stand by my position that it is going to be very hard to get this out of the jury's minds. They're watching the witnesses, they're seeing it, they're understanding this sort of powerful Me Too, moment in time, and it's difficult. That's a hard pill to swallow for juries, that this was all consensual and everyone has just changed their tune now.
Yeah, I mean, we sort of saw this with Harvey Weinstein, didn't we, where they used a little bit of the casting couch defense. She went up to his room knowing what this was about, and then, we had regrets afterwards, that sort of thing. But people understand the power relationship. And as I said, again, too, the sheer volume of it speaks to a pathological sort of conduct that is not only unbecoming, but criminal.
Right. And also I think the distinction between this and the Harvey Weinstein case, which is also his retrial is pending now in New York State Supreme Court, is that here you have essentially HD IMAX level video footage of him, beating Cassie into a pulp, and that alone connects the sex trafficking and the potential RICO aspect of this to clear-cut violence, right? And you have to think, if you're in a romantic relationship for 11 years and this is how you treat someone that you have to hold to, very close to your heart, someone you love, you're building a life with, imagine how you would treat escorts and prostitutes and, people who would just come to the party. If you would...
Hakeem Jeffries.
Hakeem Jeffries, political operatives in New York. But, if you would beat your girlfriend of 11 years to that extent in a hotel public space, I think the jury is going to infer that that's how he interacted with other people in his orbit. And I think the testimony is going to connect that. And that's going to be very hard for a jury to overlook. It just is. It's hard for anyone. You watch that video, good or bad, as far as the jury goes and trying to understand what really happened, on its face, you see someone beating a young woman to a pulp.
So who else is culpable here, though, in, allowing this to go on, participating in the freak shows, freak parties? Who are these A-listers? Are they going to be exposed? Are any more people going to be indicted? Obviously, his bodyguards protected P. Diddy, even though as he was beating and raping, allegedly, folks.
Yeah. At least, my take on the case from what I read and see and speak to colleagues of mine, certainly the investigation's ongoing. I certainly think the people closest to him, played a role in this underlying criminal activity. So certainly assistants, bodyguards, and you've heard testimony that they help set these things up. But the issue is going to be, you can legally set up a orgy and you can certainly partake in organizing and doing it. If you're transporting prostitutes over state lines, that's a different story. If you're buying illicit drugs, that's a different story. If women are being forced to do sexual acts that they don't want to do, that's a different story. But I think it will be harder to charge some of the minions in his circle than it is with people that have direct roles in the activity, the illegal activity. So certainly, the government is going to look to see who else they could charge, and I know they're actively investigating it. But these things get difficult, and the same is true with the celebrities who potentially participated in it. If you go to one of these parties and you have consensual sex, that's not illegal. Somehow they'd have to be an accomplice or aid and abet other people in committing the criminal activity. So you saw from the Maxwell trial and the Jeffrey Epstein saga, even though you have these high-profile names and even though they very well may have had sexual experiences with some of these people, it doesn't mean there's enough for criminal culpability.
Do you suspect that P. Diddy would, if I could borrow the phrase, tootsie roll on others if he could and plead out? Or there's just no interest from prosecutors for plea bargaining with him because he's the kingpin?
Well, no, I think the prosecutors are always open to a cooperating defendant, someone who could provide information on others who are committing criminal activity. But I think here the exposure is so high that even if he was able to successfully cooperate, it still would not get him out of this. It would mitigate his exposure. It would reduce the sentencing guidelines, but he still would be going away for a very long time. So even if he cooperated against everyone and told every dirty secret in the entertainment industry, there's no doubt in my mind that a federal judge, after hearing all of this testimony and understanding all this, if he was to take a plea, would certainly sentence him to a long period of time, maybe 10 years, something like that. So I think from his perspective, it's all or nothing, right? Even if he cooperated, he's going away for a long time, so he's gambling that he could potentially prevail altogether.
But if you were, on his legal team, would you say, look, this is a bad hand you have, and maybe we could get you 10 years. Otherwise, you're looking at 25 years to life, and then obviously it's his call. But do you think that conversation occurred?
1,000%. Any defense lawyer has a legal and ethical, a moral obligation to have a heart-to-heart with a client and explain the reality. And I often have this conversation where I'm like, look, from a plea bargaining perspective, you could mitigate your exposure and you can rebuild your life. Look, you do a few years in prison, whether it's state or federal, you could come back, you could, start new, start a new career, meet someone new, have kids, blah, blah, blah. But you start talking about 10, 20 years, you're coming back to space shuttles taking you around and flying cars and the future. Like you start going too far in the future, you're not coming back to the world that you know. And that's the reality, right? And that's what happens in these cases. You get 20 years, you're done. Like it's a life sentence. Look at R. Kelly, look at look at Maxwell. You're just not coming back to the world you know. If you ever get out again, you're coming back to Star Trek world. And I think that
seems, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it also seems to me that you plead out. Now you have a criminal conviction that could be used against you in civil trials, and you're going to be bankrupted one way or the other.
That's for sure. That goes without saying, and that's a reality to some degree. But certainly, if it was me advising my client and I was explaining to them that, look, you may be bankrupt, right, and that's a real reality here, but it's certainly better than spending the rest of your life in prison. And that happens in fraud cases. Most of my work these days is financial crimes and complex financial frauds. And if you plead in federal court, there's going to be forfeiture, there's going to be restitution. The life that you knew is gone. The lifestyle is gone, the money, the cars, the houses, all that is gone. But you can minimize your exposure to federal prison and you can live a normal life. And you got to balance those things out and make the right decision. But Puffy's definitely looking at this and saying, I'm betting I'm getting acquitted. I am going to, get goodwill with the jury. They're going to see that I have this diverse group of lawyers. They're going to see that I have various people from various backgrounds. They're going to understand that everyone wanted to be in my orbit. Everyone was, to some degree, consenting to have sex, right? Like no one's saying that everyone who participated in this was forced against their will. So there's no question that some of the participants just voluntarily agreed. Some of them were paid, like the escort. Even Cassie talks about wanting to do it and having sex with the escorts. So the question is going to be whether they could somehow change that tune and make it that it was all like that this was one big fun party that lasted essentially, 10 years, and everyone who participated was a willing participant.
Todd Spodek, criminal defense attorney who represented Anna Sorokin. Todd, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate your time and insights.
Absolutely. Okay, take care, everybody.
Thank you. Todd Spodek joined us on the Turnkey.Pro Answer line.
It's what Chicago is talking about. It's Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy on AM 560. The Answer.
Spring. A time to get outside, be active, play with the grandkids, enjoy life. But if high blood pressure is holding you back, the sooner you get control of it, the sooner you'll stop being a walking time bomb. High blood pressure is a serious issue. Your blood vessels are constricted, your mortality risk is high. So what can you do besides